Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us here on the broadcast. Shortly, we're going to be joined by Hezena Lematian. She is a nominated senator. Alex Njeri and Maliba Arnold are public policy commentators. And Maina Karobia is an MP at the East African Legislative Assembly. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Shortly, you'll be joined by the nominated senator here on the broadcast as we take a look at some of the major stories on the front pages of the publications this Friday morning. Starting off with the bursary dilemma, the 1.2 billion Kenya shillings that cannot be accounted for, according to a report by the Office of the Auditor General in the financial year 2020-2021. Here is what the editorial cartoon by the Daily Nation says on page number 18, and we're going to be talking about this in line with the many cases of the acknowledgement by schools across the country that less than what was declared as having been disbursed. And this is a reflection, according to this cartoon on page number 18 by the Daily Nation, and covered this showing the CDF standoff in the county of Mombasa, where MPs are retreating, the National Treasury, which has come under pressure over what MPs said is the late disbursement of the cash to the county, to the constituency coffers, and MPs who seem to be enjoying the hot massage by the National Treasury following the threats of censure of the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u, and this making up page number 18 of the Daily Nation. Maliba Arnold, I come to you first. What do you make of this, and vis-a-vis this report by the Auditor General of more than 16 counties that cannot account for 1.2 billion Kenya shillings, and 50 of the 290 constituencies as listed on page number 7 that as well cannot account for how they have utilized the 1.2 billion Kenya shillings bursary fund?
I think we've had this issue running. I think today the Daily Nation decided to make it in-depth. But we've had the Auditor General over time actually cite cases where there were bursaries that went to school where students didn't exist. A good example was Bungoma. I think sometimes last year there was a highlight where they discovered there were bursaries where were not necessarily meant to any particular student, and that head teachers and the county officials had come up with a ring where they will siphon this particular money, and it didn't really necessarily help any student or even help any particular school, meaning that it ended up in people's pockets. For MPs, the lesser we speak about it, the better, because this goes to strengthen the very ruling that the Supreme Court did to reinforce. And courts have, over time, in the last 10 years, courts have actually continuously stated that CDF offends the principle of separation of powers, and that MPs should not in any way handle it. Every time we've had this conversation here, members of parliament have said that the law, there is nothing they do around it. But then you saw them in Mombasa twice, walking out and staging and saying that they can't do anything without CDF. So there's a way the law is crafted to ensure that they do not have so much, it appears like they don't have control. But then the Supreme Court said clearly that the 2016-15 Act, as is the current one, the former one, the 2013 and 2016, the way they look like means that it offends that particular rule, and therefore CDF is illegal. However much we go around it, and I said this, I think, in December last year, on this particular set, that you don't need to read the Skok ruling alone. If you look at the BBI ruling, how the court ruled on BBI ruling, CDF remains illegal if it's still going to be handled by members of parliament in the format and structure that actually functions at the moment. So, Treasury and the AG can try to play games. I know one of the reasons why I think Treasury has been dragging its feet is that whereas the AG had done an opinion that pointed to them probably allowing them to go ahead, his is just an opinion. If you look at those two rulings widely, then you realize that we cannot continue having CDF in its current form. But then, speaking to the substance of this particular story, is that somehow we actually are people without manners. We actually are very insensitive. This money is actually set aside for needy students and needy children. So that people have gone out, and like I've already said, that these cases have been there, at least on highlighted on small scale. Now we actually have got a summation. And you look at this particular amount, and you know that it could change a lot. You remember the Northeastern governor who decided to just
sponsor all.
Mandera County governor. In Mandera. You know, how much did he put in? It was about 300 million. We are talking about 4 times that amount here. And that is just so much that can actually transform. You know, education is an equalizer. A lot of us are probably in these spaces because we were able to step into a classroom. But that people can actually play these games. And, you know, the people who are doing this are not themselves ignoramus. They're actually people who've gone to school.
Thank you. Yeah. And because I'm looking at the list of the constituencies, quite lengthy one, and starting off with Embakasi South, ending with Mbere North. But ideally, it's 1.2 billion Kenya shillings, according to the Auditor General, which, according to the report, is enough to sponsor secondary education for 22,794 students in national and extra county schools. Because you talked about the Supreme Court, there was also the same court's ruling on Chapter 6 on integrity, which it said is not for cosmetic purposes, but rather to serve the people, and that leaders should not prioritize their own interests as people. We are now joined by Hezena Lematian, who is a nominated senator. I'll be taking her account shortly. But Honorable Maina Karobia, what's the extent of this denting the moral authority and standing of MPs whose constituencies are listed here as to the money that is unaccounted for, amounting to 1.4 billion Kenya shillings?
Thank you, Ayub, for hosting me here. And Happy New Year to Kenyans, though it is too late in the year. But let me say that I agree with my brother Arnold on the issues of how we are going to, or how we handle our financial systems, our procurement systems in the country. Generally, the financial system of our country, we need to put the morality fabric into it. How do we handle ourselves? Because these resources are put in the respective accounts, members of parliament, treasury, but how we behave with those resources is what matters most. And I think we lose the point of just having the money and losing the point of the values, the morals that we have as a country. Because when you lose the values and the morals of how you run your systems as a society or as a nation, then that's how the misgovernance comes in. How you appropriate those resources also becomes questionable. So I think we have the right policies as a country. We have the right laws. We have qualified people who are holding these offices. What we should be asking ourselves is the values that we hold. Because we are told that among the 7 deadly sins in a society is when you have knowledge, but you don't have values.
Okay.
Or when you have a leadership that doesn't care about the people that they are leading. So the misgovernance and misappropriation of those funds, the bursary funds that you are talking about, comes with the values. I think the office bearers know that we have their need of people who can't go to school. Also, we have among the SDGs or other developmental goals, even at the national level, they know that these are some of the things that are required to be achieved. They basically know their mandate, but you find the values, the immediate selfish needs that people have outride the general societal goals that we might be wishing to achieve as a society.
Okay. Alex, the East African Legislative Member, Honorable Maina Karobia, paints a picture of institutions and the policies that are in place. But then the third aspect, which is the third leg of it, in that equation or framework, are the occupants of the office. It's 50 constituencies. Of course, of the 290, this is not nearly even a third of the entire constituencies. Without the concept of the blanket condemnation here, because there are MPs who have efficiently used the Constituency Development Fund kitty, how then should this be the call towards ending embezzlement and malfeasance? Because what you are affecting here, the consequences will be on children who are bright but from needy background and will have no access to these funds.
Correct, Ben. Thanks for having me over. Good morning, viewers. There's something I've always said, and I remember I sat on this set on the last show of last year, and we were discussing the Senate Oversight Fund. And you remember what I said? You do not need senators to oversight governors. What you need is a proper application of the criminal justice system. And we've been speaking about corruption in this country for since I was growing up. How many convictions have we had amongst the political elite? And when we've had those convictions, what has happened? So the first thing, and I agree with my colleagues, both Arnold and Mheshimiwa here, that it's a cultural problem. This speaks to our culture as a country. The threshold that we have, that we are ready to, extend for corruption. Because you cannot legislate. A country cannot legislate itself out of corruption. You can put all the oversight boards, you can form commissions, but if you don't address the root cause, what you're treating are symptoms and not the disease. So the first thing, and you're right, we're talking about 16 counties, right, of 47, 50 of 290. So that falls anywhere between a third, maybe 30% and 20%. Why can't we nail these guys? Why can't we hold them accountable? Why can't the speaker tell the members, so as long as you've not cleared yourself of these allegations, then you're not welcome to this house? Because we've got to do something radical. Now, you said the amount of money in question, 1.2 billion, is able to support 22,000 students through secondary education. What is the ripple effect? If you're stealing money for 22,000 students every year, how many are we stealing the last 20 years? That's what, 500,000? And, Arnold said something that is fundamental. Education is an equalizer. Education, this thing we say that when you educate a child, all right? When you educate a child, you educate a village, you educate a clan, you offer hope to a family. So there's a ripple effect. How many people they have been able to provide a livelihood for if they are able to, proceed with the education? So for me, we've got to strengthen our governance structures, our accountability structures. But I also support, and this is a conversation that has been ongoing for the last couple of years, vis-a-vis the role of the MP and the management of the CDF. And the framers of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 were very deliberate in trying to separate the two. But you need to remember, the CDF was introduced by the NAC government. And it had already been, by the time we were going to promulgate the new constitution, it was already 6, 7 years in the running. So taking that away from MPs looked cruel at that point, and of course would have political repercussions for the government that was going to implement that. But it's a conversation we need to have as a country. What is the role of MPs? And because the framers had overseen MPs having an oversight role, can we provide a framework for them to have an oversight role but not directly manage those funds?
Because you talked about the place of policies as did Maina and Maliba Arnold. There is also the accompaniment here of the Supreme Court ruling on the matter in regards to Chapter 6 on integrity and leadership, which it said that leaders should prioritize as the first thing to serve the people. Senator, coming to you, this speaks to our human index development, because Kenya is a country that largely relies on its human resource in terms of getting its global standards and standing amongst the community of nations. That also acknowledged by President William Ruto in the ongoing Feed Africa Summit, which he said the young people ought to be standing up when it comes to looking into agriculture and reorienting the country's economy. That needs education, but still money meant for bright but needy students here is embezzled or otherwise diverted. What's your take as a leader of this very indicting report by the Auditor General on the utilization of the CDF funds kitty and also the counties, and what do you propose as solutions going forward?
First of all, in regards to, thank you for being here this morning. Honored to share a panel with my wonderful fellow youth. And in regards to, first of all, in regards to the Chapter 6, I believe that there's a lot of youth unemployment ongoing. And the Ministry of Agriculture, the agricultural sector particularly, will be a leader will be the best platform to ensure that there is more youth involved in agriculture and thus creating employment and expanding our industries in the same sector. But regarding the CDF policies and all that, I believe that the CDF plays a very central role in terms of grassroots development, because this is the very, very funds that the constituency and the wards, the wards, and the constituencies at large depend. So if CDF is misappropriated, then it means that particular constituency and that particular group of people do not feel the impact of whatever our government is, the revenue we are collecting, because this is public resources. And also, my brother mentioned here about the oversight fund. You see, the role of the oversight fund particularly, which was being proposed actually even by the current president sometime back in 2002, was to ensure that the Senate provides the sufficient oversight over the millions of funds going to counties. That includes everything else. And also we are getting millions going to governors. So I believe if all these public resources are properly utilized, then the government of the day would have a direct impact on the grassroots.
Okay, Arnold, because this is affecting education, and talking about this report, let me just cite a part of the report. It said, the Auditor General said, among the red flags in the latest audit are schools reporting they never received the cash purportedly wired to them, amounts reportedly disbursed not reconciling with the number of successful applicants, some students receiving multiple bursaries, under-receiving recipients, and opaque award process. I mean, you're affecting education. There's already a great divide. We're talking about ICT and lifting up the levels of education, scaling up, because competency-based curriculum. Doesn't this widen the already existing gap? And in an environment where connections outweigh competency and where job employments are also awarded in a manner that's not transparent in many instances?
You know, I'd like to, even as a response to that, I'd like you to look at the results that came out, the KCC result. You've seen schools that ideally admits the topmost students in this particular country, and that sometimes you actually have to fight so hard. You will get your marks up there and still not make a cutoff. You've seen some of those schools registering very low grades. I know it's not good to speak about grades sometimes because it might not be understood properly, but a school, for example, that took a minimum of 380 marks, and that is for what is actually referred to as undeserving, or rather the marginalized counties, for example. As in, if a child from a marginalized community has to go to that particular school through the normal channel, they will have to score a minimum of 380 marks. But you've seen those schools, you know, those kids are actually the creme de la creme. They are in a very good environment. And then, of course, you expect that they perform very well. You've seen those kids in some of those schools registering D's and E's. You and I know exactly how those D's and E's got in those particular schools. Okay. So our system is still largely rigged. Very many ways. You know, at national level, we will speak about the ills that befall us, talking about corruption, tribalism, sometimes even issues to do with religion. But corruption permeates all levels, regardless of whatever, even religious or rather persuasion that we actually ascribe to. Okay. So it's unfair. You know, these numbers are not actually coming out properly. When you talk about 22,000 through the education system, you're forgetting that these particular funds are never paid for an individual once. So you actually need to look at you actually need to multiply by 4. So if you're talking about 22,000 through the education system, or rather the secondary school phase, you should actually remember that those are about 100,000 students who actually have been denied per year, because it will be 22,000 times 4. breaking it down.
Okay.
So we are talking about 100,000 children who then are not able to access. They are deserving, but then they are not able to access because people have just decided that it's not enough to steal all other money. You now need to steal money meant for needy children. So I think he spoke about the need to work around the criminal justice. We do not have the political goodwill to fight corruption. We speak a lot about corruption.
Okay.
We do conferences about corruption. We even come to the shows and speak about corruption. But there is very little real political goodwill to fight corruption. Because such things, people can play with everything else, but not on situations like this.
Okay, well noted, and thanks. Let's now shift attention away from the 1.2 billion bursary cash that cannot be accounted for, according to a report by the Auditor General, to the state and counties deadlock over cash, which yesterday happened at the Kenya School of Government, and that's coming up shortly after the break. The governors, the Treasury and the Commission on Revenue Allocation fronted different amounts. The Council of Governors calling for 407 billion Kenya shillings, up by 37 billion from the initially proposed amount by the National Treasury of 370 billion, but the maximum the national government can stretch to, according to the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, is 380, a top-up of 10 billion Kenya shillings. But that couldn't resolve the standoff yesterday after an 8-hour meeting in the Kenya School of Government. Now the governors will be meeting President William Ruto early February, according to the Deputy President, who also formed a committee that will look into the matter and report on the same in a week's time. When we get back from the break, we'll continue with the discussion on the cash to the counties, but that accompanied by accountability and the question of malfeasance and financial leakages across the 47 counties in the country. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir. When we get back from the break, we continue with the discussion. Stay tuned.